Hi, I'm Krista Arthur with Consilien, and welcome to the Consilien Report. Today we're having a conversation with David Oates from publicrelationssecurity.com. He is a crisis PR person and one of my favorite people. So you're going to learn a lot today. Hi, David.
Hi, Krista. Thanks for the time.
It's my pleasure. I'm so glad that we could do this.
Totally.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about what we were talking about offline, the disaster recovery PR plan or PR scenario. Like, what do you do? But before we get into that, I love your story on how you got involved with doing crisis PR. Can we talk a little bit about that first?
Yeah, it was kind of trial by fire. When I was a Navy officer, about halfway through, I became a Navy public affairs officer.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can imagine, crisis PR is just part of the daily routine. I was forward deployed in operations such as Haiti. I was also on an aircraft carrier for 2 years. And there's so many different facets of a 24-hour military operation that lends itself to crisis events, whether it's accidents, combat operations, sailors and Marines. Unfortunately, a few behave badly in foreign ports of call. So I would say it became kind of a monthly scenario that we either planned for, even if we didn't execute, or unfortunately would have to execute on a local, regional, national, and in a couple of cases, international level.
Yeah.
And so that was about a 5 to 7 year period in active duty military service before I went into the private sector about 20 years ago. And then I was a guy in various PR agencies. And then when I was in-house as the head of marketing for a software company, that any sort of crisis communications, we always set up a plan for not just the media, but for our employees, for our customers, for our technology partners, business partners, investors, and all the folks that we thought needed to hear from us first,
right,
before they would hear from the general public. I think that's the most important thing. And then when I launched my own business about 13 years ago, that just became part of the service model until it became the only service offering, which is crisis PR services.
right.
And that happened about 2 years ago.
And you don't freak out, which I appreciate. You're very calm. It's that training.
It really is. I mean, I don't want to be something. I don't want to be boastful on this one there, but you get business owners and executives who are being besieged, and their personal as well as their professional livelihood oftentimes is at risk. But I've seen aircraft crashes. I've seen accidents. I've seen sailors and Marines be arrested in foreign ports of call. Not sure if we were ever going to get them out. I don't want to sound crass, but businesses will come and go. I've seen life and death situations on some level. I don't mean to put myself up in front of a special forces or Navy SEALs or combat person getting shot at, but I've seen other things like that these kind of things don't faze me as much. I also can come in from an outsider. I don't have that personal connection right away, so I can come in as a voice of reason. I think that helps and serves me well.
Because that's how, full disclosure, that's how we met. I called you for a personal matter for a friend of a friend, right?
Yeah.
And very sensitive matter. And I just love the way that you handled that. It was like, there was no like, oh my gosh, even though that's what was going on in my mind, it was like, okay, well, this is what we need to do, and, have them contact me. And so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I'm also very, and thanks for the feedback on that. I'm also very sensitive that people don't come to me with good stuff, right? They come to me with bad stuff. And I think one of the roles I need to take is as a trusted advisor. So not passing judgment immediately, not adding to the emotional trauma.
Right.
They have opened themselves up in some respects. Business owners, executives, individuals have opened themselves up for exposure to me.
Yeah.
Or they've sort of become, I guess, virtually naked in disclosing something that's not comfortable. And I want to respect that. And so I appreciate that feedback. I work at it very hard.
Well, it shows. It shows. And, and people are calling you, like you said, when they're already in crisis. A business owner is already in crisis. We've been talking about ransomware as an example, or any kind of malware, or any kind of incident where they have a PR issue on their hand. So what's the first step besides being calm and everybody just, take a deep breath? What do you do? I mean, what's really the first step to help these organizations?
Yeah, 100%. So as I've heard from a fellow business colleague that we might know, who's a fractional turnaround COO and CEO guy, he said, how
Mhm.
do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Right.
So we piecemeal this thing in steps that have to happen in rapid succession, but steps nonetheless. And the first and foremost is come up with what you're going to say and to
Mhm.
whom you're going to say it. What you're going to say and to whom you're going to say it. So what's our statement going to be? How are we going to convey what we know and what we're doing about it? And the cardinal rule when you make that statement is two things need to be present:
Mhm.
empathy and action. Now, when I say empathy, it doesn't mean that an organization needs to admit culpability when none should be taken, right? It could be the fact that they've been besieged from a very sophisticated organized crime syndicate
Right.
that originates in China or Russia or some other rogue entity that found a
Yeah.
vulnerability that no one knew about, and you've got to take action on that. But you need to understand that people who are going to be affected by that are anxious, and there
Right.
needs to be a recognition that we've been attacked.
Mhm.
We've been attacked by a very, to the extent that we know, this looks like a very sophisticated attack.
Mhm.
And then action is, here's what we're doing about it.
Mhm.
Most people just want to know that somebody's on it, and that proper attention is being raised,
Mhm.
and that action is commensurate with the issue. It doesn't mean that you have to solve it right away, oftentimes.
Right.
It does mean that you have to convey that. That's what so you got to create that statement.
Right.
And then you got to create the vehicles by which you're going to say that. That's the first thing you need to do. And that typically needs to be done within the first couple of hours of knowing that an incident has occurred. Then the second thing you need to do is to figure out if you need to say it proactively or you
Mhm.
want to wait to respond to queries. And the reason that you go proactive with employees, customers, partners,
Mhm.
and the media is if you believe that you getting the narrative out first will do less damage to you than waiting.
Right. Right.
Because the last thing people want to hear is that something's gone wrong from a third party entity, whether that's a blog, whether that's a social media post, whether that's a reporter who got wind of it.
Yeah.
You don't want others to get the drop on something that's bad.
Right.
And so that's a reason why you might want to go proactive on that. You want to put it in context though, because there are times in which you don't want to necessarily make mountains out of a molehill, but you
Mhm.
want to be prepared if that inquiry comes into play now. I will tell you first, for a ransomware cyber breach,
Mhm.
99.9% of the time you want to go proactive. You want to alert people that this is going on, because if they find out they're a third party entity days later, your reputation is really taking a hit. So
Yeah.
oftentimes you want to take the proactive stance. And
Well,
then
I
the
think they're
third,
going to have to now with some of the legislation too.
100%. CCPA has
Yeah.
changed a lot of the dynamics in terms of requiring what you say and when you say it.
Right.
So all the more reason that you develop these plans and processes ahead of time, that
Agreed.
then you can turnkey, literally a flick of the switch, you can start to execute. People are trained, they know what their roles are, they know how to
Mhm.
disseminate information. And that sort of leads to the third question is, where do you disseminate? Landing pages, social media, press release, all hands email
Right.
to internal folks and to a customer distribution list. You're going to want to also set up how people can come back and respond and inquire, whether
Mhm.
that's a website, whether that's email, whether that's a phone number, however you can filter information back so
Sure.
people feel like they have a voice to interact with you in a legitimate manner.
And that's
Those are
hard to do on the fly. You can't do that without some previous planning,
that's exactly
put all
right.
that together. You really do have to do some planning ahead of time.
Well, you see that in
Yeah.
certainly in your world, the time to put together a disaster recovery plan, for
Yeah.
cybersecurity or anything, is not while it's occurring. Develop at least a framework that everybody knows what to do and the role is being played, because time becomes of the essence. And I'll go back to my military days. We
Mhm.
would train for accidents. We would train for mishaps.
Mhm.
Not that, and we would work extraordinarily hard to not allow those to occur. But
Yeah.
should they occur, you've got to minimize damage to people and then to equipment and mission. And the time to figure out how to do that is not when stuff is breaking. And nowadays, when the next front line is going to be businesses' network systems and sensitive personal data. I mean, we talk about global, armed conflict. We're at war every day through cyber breaches. And if you're not prepared to respond to those, at the same time trying to do your very best to prevent those, then you're only half prepared for dealing with that. Yeah, and communication needs to be part of that. Yeah, so set up a landing page that is dormant. Set up dormant social media accounts, right? Have templatized press releases to announce likely scenarios of what's going on. Set up your all hands emails that then you put into, a lockbox, if you will, a virtual lockbox that you can set out there, because you don't want an organization, employees, customers, partners, to hear it from a third-party entity. And if you're not prepared and it takes you a while to put all this stuff together, somebody else is going to set the narrative for you, and it's not going to be complete, or worst case, it'll be inaccurate, and it's going to cause you a lot of pain, heartache, and money.
That's a really good point. Not allowing someone else to set the narrative for you. Because then that's a complete and total loss of control.
So I was talking about the reason why, crisis PR is a growing business because of social media. And anybody, who goes on for a moment on Facebook knows that a statement is made, it's usually out of context, or it will be quickly taken out of context. And my job is essentially to try to put that context back in, to diffuse the anxiety that's caused when you have a bit of information that then somebody jumps to a false conclusion, and it's usually in the extreme, right? That somebody is either, it's an evil organization that doesn't care about its customer data, and so it allowed an infiltration like this to occur. And the next thing you know, they're persona non grata.
Right.
And if they're publicly traded, market cap takes a dive by the next trading day. Customers are canceling orders, and it's just a hot mess. My job is to try to put the narrative in proper context so that organizations can feel a comfort level that their employees are going to give them at least a chance to take proper action. Customers won't cancel orders. Partners won't start to question whether they should continue with a project that you're undertaking. And certainly investors aren't going to look to pull their money or call an emergency board meeting because they're questioning the C-suite's viability.
There's a good study out, the IBM Ponemon study on the cost of a cyber attack, right? And the costs are those long tail costs that you were just talking about. Loss of customers. You lose customers. It's hard to acquire new customers because now you have a bad reputation. So let's say that's the case. How do you help them handle that? They didn't hire you in the beginning. They've had an attack. They've lost customers. And according to the study, those long tail costs can extend for up to 2 years. So they have reputational damage 6 months, still 6 months after the event. And the event's probably been resolved by then.
Yeah. But the customer is still skeptical as to the credibility of the organization. So in a case of where you're playing defense to start with, so it's a great example. 9 times out of 10, I get a call from an organization after an event has occurred and 24 hours after the first news cycle has run, right? And when I say news cycle, it's not just, a news article that appears, in businessinsider.com, let's say, or latimes.com or something like that, but also the news cycle related to social media traffic and email traffic and conversations that employees are having with neighbors at the end of the day. What happens then is you've got to address not only what has immediately occurred, but weeks, if not months later, you've got to talk about how you're continually moving forward to ensure that something like that doesn't occur again.
Right.
And that's herein lies the problem. Oftentimes people start to think about their communication strategies for a cyber breach or something like that after the fact. And it's at least quadruple the costs that you would have if you had some beforehand. Because if you are able to prepare for this in advance, get your message out as it's occurring, the skepticism won't be as great. There'll still be a degree of it, to be sure. But instead of weeks and months trying to repair your reputation, maybe it's days.
Right.
And people will give you the benefit of the doubt, because especially in terms of a cyber breach. And again, this is assuming that companies do their level best to prevent an infiltration. But I think most of the general public recognizes that cyber breaches occur every day through very sophisticated channels. And so to the degree that you can get the narrative out there about, we've been hacked, here's what we're doing about it, and here's why we're on it, will give people an opportunity to go, look, it happens to every company. Here's what they're doing. Here's what they've offered me to protect my data. I can, monitoring services. I'm working with them. You know what? They're on it. Everybody gets hit. I'm not going to jump ship. So all the more reason to do preparation, to do planning ahead of time, to get the disclosures out there when you need to, in lockstep with your disaster recovery plan, your cybersecurity infrastructure, because training for it as it's occurring is just not an option.
Yeah, I was meeting with one of my insurance partners, and he said that there is that there's coverage for crisis PR actually in the insurance. Are you approved with any insurance companies, or can
it's,
all of them?
So, it's funny. I don't know if there is a certification for crisis PR, but I have had over the last year a lot of insurance companies, primarily through Southern California, just because of where you and I are based.
Yeah.
That have asked me about that plan. And there's a plan. It's literally a turnkey. Here's the crisis PR plan development and media training. And when I say media training, I'm using loosely. It's spokesperson training. It's training that you'll have if you got to speak in front of your employees or send out a customer communication, in addition to, news organizations, and how you're going to respond. And in that training too, we prepare for what I call the gotcha questions, questions that have an inherent bias, the skepticism from the audience, thinking that you didn't do all that you're supposed to do. And we help walk people do that so they can stay on message, put things in context, diffuse the anxiety at least a little bit. And yeah, I've had a couple ask me, we should bundle you in because there's a crisis PR rider on that.
Yeah.
It's pennies on the dollar relative to what it is, right? I mean, my typical crisis PR plan for what I'll call a mid-size organization, in addition with training, runs somewhere around $7,500 to $10,000. If you have a crisis breach, if you have a cyber breach that turns into a crisis PR, the meter starts at $20K and will move on up depending on what you have to do from a communications outreach plan. If the narrative is already so strongly against you, now you got to buy ad space on Google. You got to buy ad space on LinkedIn just to get your voice out there. So it's like, hey, 20 grand, keep your credit card open and I'll tell you when we're done.
Right.
And and then the long-term effect is it gets, if you miss the first news cycle, that stuff gets put on Google. And then you're talking six figures.
Yeah.
To push that onto the second page at some point.
Yeah. I thought you have on your website, I was looking at it, the $500,000, the average cost. Yeah.
That is the average cost.
Yeah.
If you of a crisis PR event that's not addressed.
Yeah.
If you start to address it after the fact, like you say, I get it after a news cycle.
Right.
It's an average of 50,000. If you can plan for it ahead of time, 10, 15,000 you could look at to get something there. So that's again, it's all about proactive, penny-wise in the front, but I wish more organizations would play that strategic playbook a little bit more, because most, for understandable reasons, they wait till after the fact. They got plenty of fires. There's plenty of initiatives. The belief is that it's not going to happen to them, or at least that when it does, it's not going to be as bad. And in the case of cyber breach, combined with the ability for people to use their phone for social media.
Right. And now sue you with, depending on the organization, it's huge.
We didn't even talk about civil lawsuits. We were talking about state mandates, civil lawsuits with privacy invasion.
Yeah.
And that's another nightmare.
I want to do another interview and we can talk about the California Consumer Privacy Act in more detail.
Love it.
I think that would be great. So how can people get to know you or find you?
So my website is publicrelationssecurity.com. My contact information is all over that. And I sent a link to you, Krista, on a really interesting blog I did about lessons learned from Marriott's cyber breach that occurred a little over a year ago, that I think really plays well into what organizations should do and what not to do. It was a very visible, very public event that I thought that there were some good things to take away from that, but also some things to avoid that really apply to any organization. But yeah, publicrelationssecurity.com. give me a ring through that. I'd be happy to talk to anybody, even if it's just a conversation about what they're doing.
Yeah, I love what you do, and I think it's so important.
I
I
appreciate
do.
that. Back at you. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much. All right.
Talk
Bye.
to you.